The Branding Your Business podcast is for small business owners looking to build a customer favorite brand and a value-driven business. From solo shows covering marketing tactics to experts sharing their brand stories, each episode delivers actionable insights for entrepreneurs who want to impact the world. We're sharing how strategic moves and authentic connections can build a profitable business minus the burnout. Tune into the Branding Your Business podcast with me, Praise Santos McKenna of Come Plum, to design a brand your audience adores while building a life you love. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Branding Your Business podcast. My name is Praise Santos McKenna. I'm the founder of the branding studio, Come Plum, and I love doing in-studio podcast recording. So when someone reaches out to me and they say they're in the SF Bay Area, I'm like, okay, so you're coming in. And so I'm really glad that Adam said yes. Turns out we kind of live in the same-ish neighborhood too. So maybe we'll run into each other a little bit more. Let me share a little bit of your stories because we have some really interesting things for you all who are branding and content creators. So Adam Nathan, after spending time at some of the most complex organizations and companies in the world, you might have heard of the White House, Apple, Lyft. Adam realized he was spending more time coordinating work than actually doing it. So a lot of our listeners are small business owners, and I know you can relate to that because sometimes we start a business to do the thing and we end up doing all the other things. So we'll get into that a little bit more. Taking inspiration from how developers worked in GitHub and designers worked in Figma, he founded Almanac to build a tool to help teams collaborate in documents with structure and transparency. In 2023, Adam launched his second product, Blaze, which is the #1 marketing AI tool for teams of one to create better content in half the time. We love things that save us time and multiply us, so we're going to get more into Blaze in a second. Adam holds systems engineering and economics degrees from Duke and an MBA with the highest honors from HBS. You might have heard of it. So I'm really glad that you reached out and we can share a little bit more of your story today. So we talked about these big, complex organizations you worked for, the White House, Apple, Lyft, but they all kind of have different focuses. And so were there some similarities of some of these big organizations as you jumped around? Were there some challenges that you're like, wherever you go, whether it's the White House or Lyft, some of these things kept on following you?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me, Praise.
Yeah.
Lovely to be here in person. A lot of the organizations I've worked at are super high performance. And so I think the through line between a lot of them is that they had super smart, dedicated, passionate people who wanted to get stuff done. I think, I worked in the nonprofit space. I worked in the public sector. I worked at for-profit companies. And I think the other unfortunate through line is that regardless of the sector, it's really hard to get stuff done these days. And I think you can even see this in the recent election results we had here in the United States, and just the general breakdown in our social contract where institutional trust is at an all-time low, both in government as well as in big corporations and nonprofits. And I think that's because the things people expect these organizations to do and provide aren't happening, at least to the same degree they used to. And I think startups and small businesses, if you look at the data, is actually the one area where people still have a lot of faith in leaders and in teams because they see small businesses and fast growing businesses as actually delivering on their promises way more efficiently than big organizations. And it's one of the reasons I made the leap to starting my own company and why I love serving our customers today, small teams, entrepreneurs, founders, creatives, because they often not just make a bet on themselves, but they have the tenacity and the courage and the creativity to follow through, and their customers and their community can feel that too.
You are speaking my language because that's so much what we talk about in branding. It's this trust and reputation you've built. And we have to acknowledge the water we're swimming in. And I love that you said it, that the community trust in bigger organizations, we are sus of it right now because they haven't followed through, or they say they're going to do one thing and then we don't see the receipts of it. Whereas small businesses, when we coach our clients, we say, hey, do what you say you'll do, or build a reputation for continually showing up for people. And that's part of your brand. And I love that you called that out. And I love that you love serving our people and seeing their tenacity really come through and show itself. And the thing when we are doing such complex things as serving our people, we get very time constrained and we can't multiply ourselves in certain areas. And it seems like you're trying to solve that problem by implementing tools like AI when we're doing some
content creation. So tell us a little bit about the origin story. So you started Almanac, moved on, and then started Blaze because you saw a problem with businesses of one trying to create content. Can you tell us a little bit about that discovery process of, wait, I can help folks solve this problem?
Yeah, well, I think the origin story really goes all the way back to my childhood. I'm from New York City, and I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My grandfather started a small insurance agency. My brother also runs a startup, and we both grew up with our parents who have always run a small business together. Basically, out of our apartment in New York City, they work in a team of two. Really, in the outdoor business, they sell hats and coats and and that kind of stuff around the country. And so we grew up with our parents. Basically talking about the business together over dinner every night. I remember seeing my mom like balance the books on her bed as we went to sleep. My dad runs around Midtown to this day talking to customers. And so my livelihood and all the opportunity I've had have come from the hard work that my parents put in. And growing up, I remember them really growing their business across the United States successfully and quickly. But as I became an adult and I moved into basically doing work in technology on the internet, I also saw my parents struggle and really become unable to take their business from the offline world into the online world. And so they still don't have a website. They don't do any digital advertising. They don't communicate with their customers via email. I mean, they're like totally offline, still pen and paper. And so for years, my brother and I would kind of exhort them over dinners like, hey, like it's so easy to set up a website on Squarespace. Like we could do it in an hour, or like, hey, it's super easy to make ads on Instagram. We can help you. And that while it was easy for us to do because that's what we've done for our careers, the reality is for people like my parents and millions of people like them, it's actually not easy at all. Because even though there were these tools that helped you get online, actually trying to produce great content is something that required a lot of skill and experience. You needed to be a professional marketer and have years of expertise trying to figure out how to write a good email or what converts on Instagram or what compels people on a website in order to generate growth from the internet, to make money from the internet. And so there's a lot of people like my parents that didn't have a way to make money online basically before AI. And what this new technology has been able to do is take people who don't have the skills or the time or the resources to produce great marketing and help them create content that can help them grow much faster on the internet. And so a lot of our customers, Blaze helps them generate social media content, newsletters, ads, websites, blogs. And we've seen on average that for customers who stick with us for like 5 or 6 months, they grow their revenue 3 times more than they were before. But the alternative to using a tool like Blaze wasn't like another tool. It was basically doing nothing. I'd say a third of our customers before Blaze were doing nothing on the internet, like my parents. A third were doing some work like putting photos of their kids or their dogs or a sunset on Instagram or on a blog, but they weren't talking about their products. They were doing stuff that wasn't really working and moving the needle. And so there's many, many people out there that were missing this really big opportunity that bigger corporations with professional expertise were using to grow their business, which is the internet. And so our goal at Blaze is to help people grow faster from the internet, people like my parents. And it's been crazy to see the response from small businesses and teams of one to our product. We've gone from 0 to like over 1 million users in a year. And I think are probably in the top 0.01% of fastest growing businesses right now. But that just speaks to the opportunity of the internet and all these people that were left out from taking advantage of it that can now participate finally thanks to AI.
I am just imagining Mr. and Mrs. Nathan in their New York City home, just like their sons are coming home for dinner, trying to convince them to get on Squarespace. And they're like, but look at all this paperwork I have. This is a system that works. And I could just imagine you and your brother being like, there has to be a better way. And it sounds like what you're helping them do actually is what a lot of folks do in the social innovation space is leapfrog, right? Because you're not just getting them to DIY it. You're actually, hey, you're going to jump ahead of the people who have been DIYing it or who have had marketing teams, and you're like going ahead of them too, which is an interesting learning curve, I imagine, for some of these folks who haven't done any social media before, who I just imagine them not even having a website and suddenly like getting exposed to a new audience that they would have never adapted to before or been in front of before. Would you say Blaze's tools are tweaked or customized for folks who are really starting from scratch? Or is it pretty accessible for anyone where they are in between, people who need robust tools or people who have those teams? Or is it really made for those people like, y'all had nothing and then we're giving you something?
Well, on your first point, it's super interesting because when we started the company, we in our marketing, we would compare Blaze to other tools like Canva or how we're better than ChatGPT. Our customers often compare Blaze not to other tools, but to people. And so we've had customers tell us, hey, we're using Blaze to replace an agency that we hired. We're using Blaze to, instead of hiring another full-time marketer, we're using Blaze to help us get all this time back, 10, 20, 100 hours a month. And so we think about Blaze these days as not a tool, but really as like a substitute for a person. It's like the best marketer you've ever had on your team. And that's because the way Blaze works is it doesn't just generate content for you. It's not like a tool that does one job, but it can brainstorm strategies for you, generate content in line with those, help you edit and collaborate on that content, schedule and post it for you in replacement of a CMS, and then analyze it, look to see what performed best, and then do it all over again. And so it basically does what you would hire a really good marketer to do, often a marketer that you don't even have funds for, you can't hire in your local area. And so in that way, Blaze is really a leapfrog over, buying 20 tools and doing it on your own, or spending $20,000 a month to hire an SEO agency or a digital agency for your ads. Blaze costs $49 a month, and it does social media content, it does ads, it does newsletters, it does websites. At Blaze, we hire a SEO agency and to do our backlinking for Google, and we pay them $20,000 a month, and that's $240,000 a year we pay for just optimizing one channel. And our customers get Blaze for basically 1/10,000th of that. And so the amazing thing about Blaze is not just that it's super fast and then it's really effective, but that it costs like pennies on the dollar compared to what people would be paying already. And so it does really leapfrog over, I think, a lot of the V1 solutions people were employing. But to your other question, I'd say probably half to 2/3 of our customers weren't doing anything at all. Or if they were doing stuff, it kind of felt like they were treading water. They would post something, once a week, and they'd be like, why isn't this generating me followers or leads? And the reality of trying to gain more sales from the internet is that the solution is really simple. It's just really hard to do. The simple solution is that you have to post every single day. You have to post compelling content that connects with your audience and talks about your products and services. You have to engage with them and create a community around your business. It's pretty straightforward what you have to do. It's just really hard because you have to be super consistent about it. And you have to think of all these different ways of saying the same thing continually. And great marketing isn't saying 100 things, 100 interesting things once. It's saying one interesting thing 100 different times. And that's not just time consuming, it's really boring. And most people who are small business owners are wearing 10 hats at once, like my parents. They're paying bills, they're talking to customers, they're coming up with new ideas, they're dealing with the government. They don't have time to think about how to repeat themselves in slightly different ways across channels every single day. And that's where Blaze is so helpful, because it's kind of like the most patient person you've ever had on your team. It can think continually of new ideas. It never gets tired. It never goes to sleep. It works day and night for you and helps you grow your business so that you can spend time doing other things that are important.
Yeah, I like this because it's even focusing on your mental well-being. And we say that to folks too, because marketing is just letting people know what you do. But I know as a human, you're going to get tired of saying the same thing every day over and over.
100%.
But it's when you say things over and over and over that people are like, they do this thing.
Yeah.
And so it's really great to have a tool to just be on repeat for you. And it sounds like that's what you've created. I want to backtrack a little bit too, because I imagine our listeners, driving in the car, listening to this podcast and thinking, okay, how did Adam become this kind of problem solver? And this is why I love getting founder stories, because we get the framework of how you kind of stumbled into this. And one of the reasons I was so excited to have you come on the show is I was kind of looking deep into your LinkedIn and some of the work that you did abroad. I have such a big heart for social innovation and social enterprise. And I know that a lot of what you do, even to this day, now that you've ventured off into tech, is still measured by impact. And so I would like for you to let's do a little bit of story time and trace back the roots for some of your early organizations, some of the things that led you to the White House, and even are some of the lessons that you learned there helping you solve the problems that you got to be solving today.
Yeah. Well, my undergraduate major at Duke was around systems change. And so I've always kind of approached the world as a systems problem. I've always been super interested in how a combination of factors, especially human behavior, either help us solve problems or don't, how it leads to dysfunction or functioning outcomes in the world. And I think sometimes people look at a problem and they blame a person or they blame a group of people or they blame like a key reason. I tend to think that most problems are like a confluence or a product of many factors at once. And so I've always been interested in trying to study the complexity and the nuance in a problem and diagnose how different factors work together to either help us get to a good outcome or a bad outcome. And that's engineers tend to approach problems this way. If you're building a bridge or you're designing a subway, you're not just thinking about one thing like the soil or the groundwater or the electricity. You need to consider all those things together. And I tend to think that human systems are even more interesting and more complicated than technical systems or physical systems. And so that's how I've always thought about the world, how I still look at the world. And that's why I went to work at some of the organizations I did. You know, the White House generally tries to, I think, solve problems by looking at them as a full system, or at least that's how we should, I think, be trying to solve problems. I think work is the most interesting problem of all. How do a group of people get together and produce a product or a service that other people find useful? How do they get that product out into the world? How do they engage people who might be interested in it and bring them in as customers or as champions? That's like human to human contact. And, there's like a magic in it in some ways if you do really well. And so I've always been obsessed with trying to study that. And of course, many organizations that don't do those things, I think, are prevented from good outcomes because they're distracted by overhead work and they focus on a lot of BS. And so much, I think, of the world we live in is full of BS. But the great thing about, the customers we serve at Blaze, almost all of our customers have taken a bet on themselves at some point in their careers where they've said, okay, I believe in my own ability to build something and make something of my potential. And then they've had the courage and the commitment and the creativity to see it through. And so there's not as much of the BS you see in big organizations or old institutions. People are like constantly putting their feet to the fire and they don't have time for anything else. And I think it's great to serve them because they're able to see through the craft in a problem straight to the root cause. And, they're looking for a product like Blaze to help them solve it.
Yeah, that's so good. I like how your background in just systems thinking, which I would love to say is just like really intense people watching that you've been doing of just like studying how these people interact in a community, in a society, in a nation, at work, trying to solve problems, and that you've honed in on a certain kind of person, like these teams of one, these solopreneurs, which like are my heart. It's my story too. And I love that you're recognizing the courage that it takes. But it's also, and I want to encourage our listeners sometimes that the courage that it takes to start a business is the thing that's going to carry you through. And sometimes it's the thing that differentiates you from these other businesses, or as Adam said, these bigger corporations that kind of get stuck in the mire of things, who don't have like the vision to move forward with something bold. There's so many other things about big corporations that solopreneurs don't need to deal with, like fundraising. Oftentimes solopreneurs can start things pretty scrappy. And once you start fundraising, which is not a wrong thing, but sometimes that's some of the mire or the muck or the overhead that you get caught up into. And so just as an encouragement to you all, as someone who's been in this work for many years and has had different experience at many organizations, this is an encouragement that that courage and that tenacity is the thing that sets you apart. And it's the thing that's going to keep your brand differentiated from other brands and businesses. So thank you for that. And thank you for sharing some of that. Do you ever feel like you wear so many hats as a small business owner? I totally get that. Here at Come Plum, we want to keep you in your zone of genius, how you serve and show up for people. So leave the branding to us. In a collaborative way through brand coaching, we help you define your brand foundations, your brand strategy, and your brand expression, all that fun stuff like logo, websites, videos, photos, and more. If you go to comeplum.com and mention in the contact form that you heard about us through our Branding Your Business podcast, you get cool perks like an extra hour of coaching or maybe even 10% off your coaching package. We can't wait to collaborate with you to build a brand that you and your clients love. There is a love story to AI right now, if you will. And we've had a few folks in, because we are in the Bay Area, thankfully, like who have been talking about AI for a while, who have been playing with AI for a while, who have been integrating it into their business. But I'm so glad to hear about your growth and Blaze's growth. But you had to bet on AI pretty early on for Blaze to be what it is today in 2025. Would you consider yourself then like a futurist? Could you tell that this was already coming? And then if so, like, What's the next thing after AI? Is like Blaze going to implement something else? I just want to get into your head. Like, what are you seeing in the future here?
I don't think I'm a futurist. Like, I think I'm like a humanist. A lot of AI tools feel like they're built by engineers for engineers. If you use ChatGPT, I think, frankly, it's super unintuitive to like chat with your computer and try and get really good at this like prompt engineering thing. I think it's something that will go away because it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. People don't often care about the means of how something works. They just want the end outcome. And so I think a lot of great entrepreneurs think more in a framework of jobs to be done. What are things that people need to do every day? And how are they doing them already? What are the downsides to those alternatives? Is there an opportunity to make that job much more efficient or much more effective, much quicker, much cheaper through a new technology? And I think that's how we approach trying to find the opportunity that we have with Blaze. A lot of great businesses are often built off the backs of disruptive technologies. And it was clear, I think, early on that unlike other bubbles like maybe crypto, like AI was real and this technology would produce way greater efficiency for people on whole new markets and use cases that didn't exist before. And so the hard part about building a company though is not to identify the technology, but to try and figure out like specific market opportunities. And there's a term in startup land called product market fit, which kind of signifies a business that has traction. The hard part of product market fit isn't building a product, it's finding a good market. These days, it's basically possible to build anything you want given enough time and money. It's really hard, though, to find markets that work because most markets where there's demand have a product that serves that demand. It's kind of like, if you're like in the 19th century, like scouring the West for oil or minerals, like, and you go to Texas and you just see oil wells everywhere. Most of the places that have easily accessible demand like have some supply. And so your job as an entrepreneur is kind of like a prospector where you need to go find like a seam of mineral somewhere that other people can't find. And often it looks bad in some ways. That's why other people have ignored it or undervalued it. And so when we were building Blaze, we realized, okay, AI is going to be this technology that's going to radically change many industries. We identified marketing as one of the first because generative AI first focused on copy. And now obviously we can produce things like images and videos as well. But it was obvious that marketing was going to be one of the first industries affected or improved by AI. And we built an early prototype of Blaze and showed it to probably several hundred types of customers of all sizes and shapes. And when we showed it to big corporations, big enterprises, the reaction was kind of like, oh, this is like super cool. I'm going to go talk to my legal team and like maybe we'll get a pilot project working in a couple months. We'll get back to you. It felt like a nice to have solution. But when we showed it to small businesses, solopreneurs, creatives, agencies, freelancers, the reaction was like, oh my God, I need this right now. Like, can I have access to this today? Like, how much money do you want? Take it from me. And we realized that big businesses have an alternative to AI. They have professional marketing teams. And yeah, AI might help those teams, get 2x better, 3x better, 5x better. But that's not significant enough often for those, to make a rapid change to a new tool or a new process. Whereas small businesses, as we were talking about, many times have nothing. They're not doing anything on social media, not doing anything for SEO. And so the alternative is zero. And so something like Blaze that produces high quality content in a matter of seconds for less than $100 is like not just 100x better, but like 1,000x better than the alternative. And often when you're building a product, you want to feel that like pull from your customer into the market where they so want your product that they're trying to grab it out of your hands. Because as a startup, you have a limited time, you have limited resources. And so you kind of want like the first version of your product, which is going to be bad and underwhelming and incomplete in many ways, to be good enough for those customers so that as you build a better product and you have more marketing, the demand, the intensity will only get better, will only increase. And so we felt that pull really early on from the set of customers. And what's great about, I think, our customers is that a lot of they've been generally underserved over time. If you look at small businesses, people talk a big game about how small businesses, teams of one are the backbone of the American economy, but they often are underserved by government. They don't have enough access to capital. They don't have a lot of tools built for them because a lot of people think that small businesses are bad businesses, that they're small because they don't know what they're doing. We believe, because we've seen over tens of thousands of our customers, that small businesses are often great businesses. And the fact that they exist being as small as they are is a testament to their founders' will and creativity and ingenuity. And we think that just because you're small doesn't mean you can't be great, and that these businesses deserve as good tools as any other. And the cool thing about AI is that it really has the potential to level the playing field for small businesses, where before it felt like in America and I think around the world, if you want to be successful, you needed to have a lot of money or have a lot of power, or have a lot of connections. And then if you were small, there was this like glass ceiling that prevented you from getting super far. With AI and with Blaze, you can basically be a team of one human, but have like a team of 20 or 40 or 100 people behind you who are as good in their fields as anybody else working for you. And that has the potential to change the game and rewrite the rules of the economy around who gets to win. You don't need a lot of money. You don't need a lot of people. You don't need a lot of power, I think, in the future to not just reach your potential, but like be the number one provider or business or agency in your market. All you need is your creativity and your force of will. And I think that's how it should work. And I think we're, in terms of being a futurist, like that's the world I see us rapidly advancing towards. It's less about the technology and more about what the technology will help people do and what our society will look like as a result.
Yeah, that's so good because it comes back again, like to this human ingenuity, this human creativity. But then as humans, we're also coming up with tools to just highlight that more. And that's kind of the direction we're going. You said something so good about product market fit, which you talk a lot about in your email newsletter, Startup Tycoon, which we'll put in the show notes. I kind of want to double click on that a little bit more because for those who are just listening to the audio version of this podcast, you need to switch back to the video and then just see the visual. He's like, no, you want your audience to pull at this product. You want them to just say like, shut up, take my money because it's helping them so much. Could you, this is a bigger conversation, could be a whole podcast in and of itself, but think about these teams of one who are trying to figure out, okay, some people will pay me for this thing. I'm a photographer. Some people will pay me for some photos, or I'm a coach. Some people will pay me this, but I want that reaction for people to just be like, no, more. I want more. If someone had limited time budget, they're wearing a million hats, they don't have a huge team, are there tips and tricks that you would give them to help them with discovering their product market fit or when to pivot or what to tweak?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably a whole nother episode we can get into, but as a disclaimer, my expertise is in digital products and in startups building software, built for products now. And so I know a bit about how to do this, but I'm not an expert in, physical goods as much, which have, longer lead times. You can't iterate as quickly. But with product market fit for software products and in startup land, as I mentioned, the hard part is finding the right market. It's not the product side. A lot of founders focus first on product because it's fun and it's fun to build stuff. And a lot of founders, I think, incorrectly believe that their job is to define a vision of the future and then like obstinately stick towards it. When in reality, your job as a founder is to build something other people want and will pay for and will consequently love. And I ask a lot of founders I mentor, do you want to be a founder or do you want to be an artist? Because I think if you think about what artists do, they have a vision of their creativity in their head, but they're really painting or sculpting or molding for themselves. A lot of artists are famously not rich. The work is very satisfying, but it's not often something other people want to buy. If they get lucky, that's the case. But it's mainly a kind of a hobby or a passion project. Whereas being a founder is inherently about building something for other people, which requires a lot of founders to sublimate their ego and adopt this position of extreme humility in listening to other people with what they say they want instead of what you think they want. That's not intuitive to people who at the same time need kind of the force of will to go out in the world and take a bet on themselves to start a company. You have to be able to balance that courage in yourself with the ability to realize you're not your customer and that you have to listen to other people and act on what they want, which is often not what you think they want or what you want to build for them in order to be successful. That's, I think, a really important framework a lot of founders miss. And I know many people who have failed because they have decided on that kind of core choice, do I want to build for other people or for myself, that they don't want to build for other people and they can't build a business as a result. But in terms of finding your market as a startup, you want to find a market. As I mentioned, there are many good markets out there, but many good markets have good products to serve them. And so you need to find a market that is good, that doesn't have a good product yet. And that often comes from rapid changes in either technology, in consumer behavior, like an iPhone, or in regulation, like the Dodd-Frank Act that I worked on in the Obama administration. And so those types of rapid shifts are kind of like earthquakes in the ground that can like open up a seam that didn't exist before that you can take advantage of. And so often great businesses are built around these types of disruptions because, especially in startup land, if you take on venture capital, you have to grow from $0 to $100 million in revenue in 10 years. And there's just not that many markets that can support that. Even if you don't raise venture capital, which I don't recommend people to do, and you just bootstrap, you try to become profitable, it still is really, really hard to go from nothing to something before you run out of resources. And the way that you can detect that is a bunch of tests that I've kind of perfected over time to first validate demand and then validate whether or not people want your product for their demand. The best way to validate demand for an idea, and again, this involves no coding at all, no product building, is a simple landing page test. So there's a great tool called Unbounce, which allows you to put up a landing page pretty quickly with a value prop. And the landing pages in these cases are not beautiful. Like, they're not designed, but that's actually the point of the test, is that if you only spend a couple hours trying to explain your idea, even with that limited investment, do people still grok the idea well enough and understand it well enough that they want to put in their email and sign up for a demo? And so you can build a landing page quickly within hours. I often recommend putting a couple $100, maybe a couple $1,000 into Google and Facebook ads, and see if within a bunch of weeks, you can get 100 people to sign up for a demo by including their credit card number. And the credit card entry is key, because if people are willing to give you their credit card number to see what it is you're talking about, you know that you've tapped into this intense seam of demand where they're willing to give you access to their payment info. You don't have to charge it. You can make it clear that you're not going to charge them for anything. There's no actual product yet, but that's a really good sign of validated demand. And the landing page tests and ads help you with this other key question of who wants your product. Often, a huge mistake many founders make is that they don't get specific enough about who they're serving. They think, oh, I'm serving all young people, or I'm serving everyone in San Francisco. When in reality, the more specific you can get with your idea, the more successful you'll be. It'll be easier to build a product that really helps the needs of a certain group of people. It'll be easier to target them with your marketing over time. And so the landing page test can help you figure out who exactly wants your product. It's not going to be everybody, but it'll be a very small group of people. In fact, the smaller, the narrower, the better. If you're listening and you're like, wow, this test sounds hard, I don't think I'll pass it. That's the point. You actually want to fail at this test a lot, because it will save you months or years on the back end of pursuing an idea that not a lot of people are interested in. As I mentioned, there aren't that many ideas that can scale really, really quickly. And so the high hurdle of this initial test is to basically cycle through a bunch of bad ideas that people don't really want to get to an idea that people do. It's kind of like if you go on a first date, after which you have to decide if you're going to marry that person. You don't want that first date to be like a 7 out of 10 where you're like, oh yeah, we had a second drink, we had a very pleasant conversation, they were cute. You want to be like, oh my God, I wanted to reach across the table and take them home. And you want that intensity, that those sparks to fly. And so my biggest advice for people who are trying to find product market fit is to do this kind of high hurdle test right at the beginning, to make sure that the thing you're then going to invest a lot of time in, build product for, raise money for, hire people to help with, is something that people actually want.
Okay, so that was so helpful, because what I'm hearing from you is you have to listen first and really determine what is it that people need. I also love the precursor of that. Are you creating for yourself, or are you really creating to solve the problems of the people around you? I'll push back a little bit, because sometimes we often solve problems for ourselves that we know can solve for other people. So there's that. But you want to test it and make sure, is it just one other person that I can solve this problem for? Or will there be at least 100, and not just 100 who are oh yeah, it's 7 out of 10. I'd be into it. No, it's those people who are I want to propose to marry you kind of people who really want it and grab it. And that way you are listening and doing the work beforehand, instead of investing time, resources, and money, going down a path that you're I think maybe there's a market for this, or I think there's an opportunity here. This is just an easy way to get at the beginning. And I love the idea too of, hey, make sure they have skin in the game too. You might get some people who say they're going to do this, but can you get a little bit of a commitment from them to put their credit card where their mouth is as well? And so you need to sign up for Startup Tycoon so you can get more wisdom about this, because I just don't know if we even have time to unpack this a little even more, because there's so many sub lessons underneath all those points.
The one thing I'll say on that, because this comes up a lot, is yes, it is totally fine to build for yourself, to build in an area that you understand. That's why there's so many note-taking apps and to-do list apps and social media apps. But the thing I've been amazed by in my own experience is, even though, Blaze is a tool that we use internally, my LinkedIn content, my Twitter content is often drafted first by Blaze. We use it to write landing pages on our website. So we use it internally, but I am wrong all the time about what our customers want. What I think they want is not what they actually want. They often want something that's much simpler than what I think. And I think that's because humans, and especially entrepreneurs, tend to love complexity because it's interesting to us. It's compelling to think about. It's exciting. It's intriguing. but most people want like a very simple thing to be done well. And so even if you're building for yourself, it's still really, really important to talk to the people you're serving and make sure that those people at scale, because as a business, you're going to end up serving tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, that you are building for their basic needs and you're satisfying their basic needs really well, because it's really easy for founders to get enamored by the complexity of their vision and kind of move up to trying to solve a problem on the 21st floor when people are still on the ground floor. Like you were talking about, a lot of our customers don't even have websites. They don't even have a brand. They don't even have a blurb about what they're doing. And so like a staggering number of the people we serve, we are helping at like step zero in the process. And even though because we're spending all our time thinking about this, are, like several miles ahead of them. And so it's really, really important or I have found it important to stay super humble and stay connected to our customers and make sure that we are building for them and not for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's also such a good point, because we were talking about like at the beginning when you're validating your idea, but it sounds like this product market fit is also just like continual work of listening again. Like, okay, I want to build you this thing. It's going to get you up here. And then it sounds like you have a system of listening to your customers even now. And they're like, no, Adam, just keep on doing this well. And it seems like, what is that system of listening that you continue to do now that Blaze has already taken off? Are you emailing folks? Are you calling people up? How is that working?
Yeah, the answer is like 1,000 lead bullets, not one silver bullet. Some of the things that we do that I think are super tactical but really helpful that most companies overlook is that we prioritize bug tickets from our customers ahead of new feature work. Many companies, again, get really excited about building new stuff, but people aren't buying Blaze for features they don't know we have yet. They're buying the product for what it does today. And so every morning in our engineering stand-ups, we go over bug tickets from customers, from our customer service team before we talk about new stuff we're building. We assign out those bug tickets. We have really aggressive SLAs. So we try and get all bugs done within 24 or 48 hours, because customers, if the problem isn't solved quickly, they're going to churn. No one's going to wait 2 weeks for us to fix a problem that they urgently need solved now. We do a lot of QAing of the product ourselves. Often it's surprising how many companies release features without actually testing them. A lot of people don't like actually testing their own work, whether it's marketers looking at the results of their content, or salespeople actually asking someone to pay, or engineers testing their own features, because testing means you actually get to see the reality of your work. It hurts to realize you're wrong or something sucks or that you failed, but that learning is actually where you improve. And so we have built muscles on our team to test our work and get through the kind of short-term pain of realizing what we did is not up to snuff right now, so that we can eventually get to the point where we think it's worthy of our customers. I just came from a meeting we had for 2 hours before this, where we were looking through output that Blaze generated for our customers, basically Instagram images. We looked through 157 pieces of content we generated for our customers. And, it's easy to test something once or twice on our own, but looking through the actual output, we realized kind of at scale, like all the different ways that we didn't serve our customers very well. And these were customers that downvoted their designs, essentially designs that weren't up to their standards. And it's not a fun meeting to sit through, because you realize like, oh my God, I can't believe like we gave a customer a piece of content that looked like that. But that's how we figure out what's not good so that we can make it better for everybody. And so I think just building in these tactical systems every day into the way that your team works, so that you're putting customers first, you're figuring out what's not right so that you can make it better, is the way to move up the curve. And the faster you do that, the more you iterate, the more excellent you'll become. We believe that iteration is a function of excellence. The more cycles you have to make something better, the better it will eventually get. And, I just think doing any of this already puts you as a founder or you as a startup or company ahead of your peers, because I know so many companies that just reflexively avoid feedback. They avoid customer input and like looking at the output of their work, and just like driving blind. And of course, you're going to go off a cliff if you're doing that for too long.
Yeah, I feel like that is it's again, the brave thing to do is to be critiqued and to look at your work and really make it excellent, to apologize for saying, oh, shoot, we gave our customers this subpar content, and it's uncomfortable. And I know what it feels like to have to look at that. But if you don't do that periodically, if you don't do that well, then people are going to leave. And so I love that piece of advice of just get continual feedback. Don't be afraid of the criticism. If y'all are passive people or conflict avoidant people, you're going to have to learn to be more assertive people in your businesses if you want to have long-term
It sucks.
growth.
I mean, like being bad at something sucks. Everyone knows that. If you go to the gym for the first time and you're like looking around, you're like, what equipment should I use here? And you feel like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. And like, this is so heavy and I feel awkward. Like that is the same feeling you have when you do anything new, but it is essential to like be able to absorb that pain and like live with the duality of, yeah, I don't like this, and enduring this is what will make me great. And the same thing is true, I think, in any aspect of life, whether it's fitness or nutrition or your relationships or your business. It's like being open to that feedback, being able to absorb it somewhat unemotionally, or at least like deal with the emotions so that you can improve, is the way that you become excellent. And because a lot of people avoid it, they never become excellent. And so just building those muscles is the single most important thing to achieving greatness, because many people don't do it. And if you can, it makes all the difference.
That is huge. Well, we are coming toward the end of our time here. And one of the cool features about Blaze is there's a feature in it that helps you define your brand voice, right? Because if we have this AI, these great tools helping us create content, we need to make sure it sounds like our businesses too. So that is such a cool tool. And there's so many kinds of brand voices out there. There's so many kinds of businesses that need different tones, need different vibes and feels. And so we do that so much here on the Branding Your Business podcast, of helping folks figure out what their voice is, what their copy should sound like. And so we're going to kind of do a reverse psychology game in that we have some of these brand cards. These are not new for our folks listening to the podcast. And so I don't know what cards we're going to pick. And what's going to be fun is that we're going to kind of put you in just the general like audience mode, and that I'm going to pull out some cards and it might say like bold, and you're going to name a brand, a business, a startup that you're like, you know what, you know whose brand voice is bold, or you know whose brand is bold. So there's no wrong answers. We kind of just want to see what comes up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Let's just see what happens. We'll do 5 of them. Okay. So let's do one on this side. Okay. Refined. What is a brand that is refined?
I would say Apple is super refined. That's an easy one. I look at like any of the LVMH brands on the fashion side as super refined. I think they do refined better than anybody
Yes. That's a good answer. Okay. I want you to pick one.
current. I'm always amazed at Nike's ability to diagnose the zeitgeist and create current like relevant ads that just capture it. I was on their YouTube page last night and just looking to see what they did for the Super Bowl. And they had this ad about female athletes that felt like just like perfectly timed for the political moment that we're in and what's happening in sports generally. And I think no matter what side of the aisle you're on, you could see something in it. And they've done that just, year after year, trend after trend. And yeah, I would love to be a fly on the wall in their marketing team meetings.
Talk about listening to their people or listening
Totally.
to like the climate. They're excellent at that. Okay. I'm going to just put 3 more down and we're going to rapid fire. Okay. Ordinary. That's an interesting one.
Lysol,
Okay. Ordinary, classic,
functional,
cheeky.
Virgin, Atlantic.
They're such a fun brand. And progressive.
I think the Obama campaign in 2008 was like the hope and change, some of the best marketing and branding I've ever seen. So
The glory days.
yeah, I wish we could go back to that.
That was a good time. I'm so glad to have you here on the podcast. Can you tell our listeners, our watchers, how they can find you and connect with you?
Yeah. So if you're interested in anything I talked about with Blaze, we have a 7-day free trial. It's all available at blaze.ai. We also have a free community and lots of free content so that even if you don't use the tool, you can talk to peers like you in your verticals to help figure out how to grow faster. On the internet. It's a super great resource. And I write a lot about how I built the business with Blaze and other things I've done at startuptycoon.com. And would love to hear from you directly. You can sign into my DMs on Twitter or on LinkedIn.